Hi, I'm Becky from Let's Make Geek Stuff, and this is part 2 in making Galadriel's armor from EVA foam. In this video, we'll be making all these chest details. Let's get going. I've cut out all the chest details out of 4mm craft foam, so thinner than the 6mm I used on the body. And I've transferred the markings that I can, but now I need to transfer all these blue markings. These are where we're going to add some details, and these hashtags as well. Also where we're going to glue the overlap of these pieces. So I'm going to do that by cutting this piece apart layer by layer and then using it as a template to transfer to my piece. Now I'm going to go through the same process with this smaller detail piece and this front piece. To mark these radiant lines, I'm using a straight pin, and then I'm just poking a hole on the pattern. My pattern's flipped upside down right now, but I can still see the holes from when I did it on this side, so I'm just going to poke holes. Now I can see those tiny little holes, and I am just going to connect them like dot to dots. This piece is slightly raised in the middle, and so to get that kind of effect, we're going to need to bevel this edge a little bit. Just not a lot, just a little bit. You could do that either with a rotary tool, like sand it, or I'm just going to take some scissors and I'm just going to kind of shave it at a little angle. See? Just a little. Now I'm going to do that to the other side. I'm going to put up a picture of what this front detail looks like up close. As you'll see, these edges are rounded off, and then it kind of slowly melts into not being rounded but being one piece at the bottom. So I'm going to, with my rotary tool and a fine grit sanding barrel, this is probably about a 320. I'm going to round the edges up here, and then I'm going to move to more of a just like a beveled look down here. Whenever you're sanding EVA foam, don't forget your dust mask. Here's the first piece done, and I want to give you an example of what I mean by rounded. So this edge, if you'll see, I've kind of rounded it on both sides. And then as we've moved about halfway down, I switched to just beveling it this way. I'm going to do that to these and these. Let me do a side by side here and you can see what I'm talking about. Do you see how there's this raised ridges here that make it look like flowing blades of grass or whatever across? I'm not sure what the metaphor is, but you know how, here's the picture. You can see how there should be some divisions here on this piece. And so I'm going to give you a few different options on how to do this. Let's call it good, better, and best. The first option would just be doing a cut and heat, and I'll show you how to do that here in a second. But this would be the option if you don't have a lot of time or if you don't have a lot of resources and you just want to kind of give a suggestion to this look. You can see the divisions of the lines there. Let me show you how I did this. I have a scrap of foam here. I'm going to take an X-Acto knife. You could do this with your utility knife. And I'm going to make a cut along the line about halfway deep into the material. I'm just going to cut a line into the foam, trying to press with even pressure. Okay. So there's the line. Now I am going to heat this foam with a heat gun. You see that line opened right up. And so that gives us a detail line that will enhance the costume, pretty easy to do. The second method I'm going to give you, we'll call this the better method, is applying thin strips of foam, and I'll show you how I did this. I've cut a piece of scrap foam here. Now I'm going to use my rotary tool and I'm going to bevel the sides of one edge of it. Well, I've rounded this edge with my rotary tool, and now using a straight edge, I'm going to cut that rounded edge off. And I just want it to be a thin strip, just a couple millimeters thick, really. Now I have a thin strip like this. I'm going to want to make 4 of these. Measured these to fit the lengths, and now I'm just going to use contact cement to glue them on. My goal when I put these on is to make them as smooth and flowy as possible. There is a little bend at the end. You'll see that on the pattern. I just want this to... I'm not going to fight it too much. I just want it to lay in as straight a line as I can. One. I've chosen kind of the thicker, each piece had kind of naturally a thicker side and a thinner side. I've chosen the thicker side for the top, the thinner for the bottom. If this was all you were going to do and you weren't going to go on to the next step with the foam clay, now what you'd want to do is clean this up with the rotary tool like I did on this one. I kind of tapered these in to make it more organic, and then I kind of beveled them out at the ends just to get that nice shape, and I was done. The final optional step to get the best result would be to use a foam clay. This one is just the one that was available at my local Michael's. You could also use this Crayola Modeling Magic. It's not as flexible and not as easy to work with for our application, but if it's all you had available, it would be worth a try. I do prefer this EVA cosplay modeling foam. But the thing about modeling foam is once it dries, it is not as flexible as EVA foam. And so we can't apply this until later in the process. Since I'm going to use modeling foam to add some detail to the top of this, I'm going to leave this untouched, but I am going to, with my rotary tool, just kind of bevel and blend in these bottom pieces. On this kind of collared neck piece where the star is right here, I am going to bevel all around the edges because I don't want it to stand out like a separate piece. I want it to kind of look like one flowing piece. My beveling's done. Now in the armor there's kind of this flowy indentation that happens here. And I'm going to recreate that by first doing a cut and heat, and then I'm going to rotary tool it out a little to just give it some shape. So here's my cut line. Now I'm just going to grab the edges of that cut with my edge of my sanding barrel and just widen it out a little. I'm going to do the same cut and heat technique with these radiating lines. Just like I did on the other pieces, I'm going to use my sanding barrel and I'm going to round out these edges. This little thing, I'm going to round it all out on both sides. And I'm going to bring that rounding down to about this far, and then I'm just going to bevel one direction from there to the bottom. Now going back to the source material, you'll see that this edge kind of rolls up a little and that this twists under. So I'm going to try to roll up these edges a little, applying some heat and then massaging the EVA. So now with the shaping, it looks like that. I'm going to do the same shaping to these pieces and these. With all the sanding, the beveling, the line cutting, the shaping all done, we're ready to glue this together. Now, we're going to be careful to line up all these notches, and when it's done, it's going to have a little wave to it because it's going to go on the breastplate, and the breast part kind of goes down like this. The other thing to keep in mind when gluing this together is we want this edge to, and this one as well, to be raised up a little. And so we're not going to bring the glue all the way out to the edge. So when we glue it, we do want it to have some definition. We don't want it to be glued flat. When I glue under this edge, I'm not going to bring the glue totally out to the end because I want it to curl up a bit. Now here on the bottom part, I can bring the glue all the way to the edge. I just want it to curl up on that top portion. I'm doing a little pushing and pulling to get all these marks to line up. Making sure that this side didn't glue all the way down. It's still kind of popping up, giving us those 3 dimensions that we're looking for. Perfect. So here is the chest piece front, and you'll remember these guidelines we traced onto the chest piece, and here is the front detail. And I'm just going to dry fit this to see how it lines up. We want this to pop out. We don't want to glue it flat. Around. And then again at the bottom, we want that to line up with this middle line. Again, it's going to pop up a little. We're not going to glue it flat. So we can get that detail from the armor. I'm going to glue here, around the perimeter here. And then I'm going to do glue along either side down the front so that it will glue flat. One thing to note again is we want these to be curling up off of the armor. So I'm not going to bring the glue all the way to the edge again on that on these side pieces. I'm going to leave maybe 4 millimeters around the edge so that we can get that three-dimensional curl. I'm not gonna lie, this next part is tricky. So my best advice is to go slowly, lay everything down really lightly. Contact cement is forgiving that way. So lay it down lightly, adjust as needed. Don't press firmly till you're sure everything is lined up. The bottom should extend, like the bottom of this should extend past the bottom of the under just a little bit. Okay, so now I'm just gonna commit, press it down to glue it. See how I have that peak here at the bottom? We want that. Make sure this edge stays up. I'm going to glue this top part. Now, remember we want it to have the shape of going over shoulders, right? So, here, look, see how this top piece is coming out to a peak and there's kind of an empty triangle there. And then this will come around and glue like that. And then this weird little piece, let me see if I can, it will come under and glue like that. Like the tip of it is under the edge of this decorative piece on top. The point of the necklace piece should line up with this notch right there. I'm gonna go ahead and draw that on so I know where to put some glue. Thanks for joining me. In part 3, I'll be fitting this on the model and doing the final touches.